Welcome to the Capital Compass, podcast to help you navigate your journey to value. I'm Susan Edwards, and today we're exploring a challenge that's becoming increasingly important for healthcare leaders who are members of group purchasing organizations. And that is the gap that has been negotiated in a GPO supplier agreement and what they actually realize from their capital investments. Healthcare systems today are balancing enormous pressure, aging infrastructure, rising construction costs, technology modernization, tighter operating margins, and the demand to do more with every capital dollar invested. And while organizations spend significant time and efforts planning capital projects, the reality is that many never have full visibility into whether the financial value they have secured was ultimately realized once the project's moved into execution. But it's not because teams aren't working hard. It's because today's capital environments are incredibly complex. In this episode, we'll explore where value leakage happens, why it's often difficult to detect, and how one client challenge led to the development of Vizient's Capital Procurement Recovery program. Joining me today are Patrick Malone, Associate Principal and Senior Subject Matter Expert, and Nikki Owen, Director of Contract Services and the creator of the Capital Procurement Recovery program. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Susan. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure.
We have a lot to talk about today, so let's just dive in. Let's start with that big picture and why this matters now. So, Patrick, I'm just going to start with you. When you look across the healthcare industry today, what do you think the biggest pressures that organizations are facing around capital investments and facility modernization?
Today, healthcare organizations are really facing a significant rising construction labor cost. Medical equipment costs are increasing, all while they're trying to modernize these new facilities, these aging facilities, and expand access to care. They're also dealing with tighter operating margins and increased financial scrutiny, which is driving healthcare systems to maximize every capital dollar spent to fully leverage the procurement and supplier agreement value that we have within our supplier agreements.
So, as you described, construction, finance, and the clinical teams and the parties that are involved in making these decisions, how do you think fragmentation across those teams have created blind spots?
Well, I think the biggest issue in these construction projects is that there's handoffs. There's so many different stakeholders, and the handoff between each stakeholder really assumes that someone else has already done the necessary work to negotiate the purchase and ensure that the project schedule does not pressure the urgency or escalation of missing steps, going through and not doing all the correct activities to make sure that you're getting the correct value. There's so many stakeholders within the projects that you're really assuming that someone else has done work that may not have occurred. So all the necessary steps to ensure that all the value within supplier agreements that have been negotiated by your GPO have not been fully realized. And so the process, when it moves from planning or specification and selection of equipment into the supply chain team to actually go out and source this equipment, they're missing that value. The schedule's pushing them to get something done so that you can ensure that equipment shows up on time. And so people are just checking boxes and pushing it off their desk to make sure that they meet the schedule.
Where do you think the key point or the pivotal points, maybe plural, where organizations kind of lose that visibility into potential value or financial leakage of a project?
I think it's really at that procurement piece. It's when they move into that procurement process and they realize that there's been so much planning done, but now they're speeding through the process to get it ordered. And they just don't do the work they need to do to get it done. They don't put the brakes on. And I think it backs up. They don't plan far enough in advance the necessary time to do it. So understanding what needs to be done and all the steps, if you build that into your schedule, you're not rushing through just to get processes completed to meet a timeline. You've actually planned that time into your schedule to be able to be efficient and drive the maximum value.
So do you think this is more of a strategic issue or operational or financial or maybe a little of both?
I believe it's really a strategic and an operational. But because those aren't done, it impacts the financial. The biggest significant impact is on financial. So if you fix the first two, the financial one will come in line.
That makes sense. So I think that follow-up question then becomes, considering the margins of today's healthcare systems and how small they are and how hard our leaders are fighting to keep every dollar spent, how does this amplify that importance of recovering and protecting the value that's been negotiated in the GPO agreements?
Well, they are under significant financial pressures from all sides, from payers, from the cost of equipment, cost of construction. So anything you can do to put capital dollars back in their budget or keep them from paying out money that they don't have to is pivotal. And so what we do through our recovery program really helps put that money back into their system so that they can reinvest it into additional capital initiatives, additional construction projects, or just delivering patient care and expanding care to the community.
Makes sense. Yeah. So as this entire healthcare industry continues to shift and sites of services are moving and margins are slim and people are fighting for protection of every dollar that they have, let's talk about some of the challenges that happen in that leadership capacity that address some of these emerging challenges. I'd like to really hear opinions about what makes capital projects so uniquely vulnerable to financial and value leakage.
I'll start off and let Nikki jump in on it, but really you have so many different stakeholders, from the facilities planning and design teams, possibly an internal equipment planning team if the client has that. If not, then you've got outside third-party consultants that play into that deal, as well as now then you get supply chain in the mix. And again, it's just all the different people not understanding who's got what responsibility for the different aspects of the procurement cycle. That really is what feeds the confusion and the opportunity for loss.
Yeah, I really feel like there's a lot of people who have their hands in the pot, so to speak. You've got third-party planners, you've got your distributors, you've got your construction team, and sometimes your facilities and your supply chain team, they're not necessarily communicating with one another. And so it creates this urgency. So there is this reactive from a supply chain and procurement perspective versus everyone kind of working together throughout the whole process and being proactive, so that when it gets to supply chain for procurement and execution and delivery, all of the steps have been followed.
I think the complexity of the GPO agreements also plays into it, and these clients not having necessarily the subject matter expertise to understand how those agreements are structured and how to pull the full value out of those agreements. And that's where I think having a responsible party on the team that really knows how to do that is where they would get the best value.
Let's talk about what that looks like as we talk about value leakage or financial leakage. What does it look like in the real world?
The financial leakage really looks like, could be a variety of different things. It could be the third-party planner or an internal resource saying, hey, I need a quote. And they assume they got their Vizient pricing in their appropriate tier, but it was misquoted. Also, the terms and conditions on the Vizient agreement may not have been realized. For example, could potentially have been that you paid freight and you should not have, according to the terms and conditions. It could also be that you paid an overextensive amount of a distributor markup. And then also, you might have a quote, everything got quoted correctly, but when the invoice comes in to match, you ended up overpaying because there was a pricing discrepancy on the invoice and no one caught it and they just accepted it.
Another area that I see Nikki's team doing such a great job on is she mentioned the tiers. And there's so many tiers on different contracts that we have. And the sales team, the supplier sales network, is not always real forthcoming about your organization has already bought this much from us over the last 12, 24 months. And based on that past purchase volume and what you've got now, you really are eligible to move up to another tier to get a more attractive price point. And understanding that those tiers are there and knowing how to navigate that and to look at the data that we have access to really helps open up that opportunity for Nikki's team to then drive value and help bring additional savings into that customer.
And we find a lot of clients just assume that when they qualify from a spend perspective to increase their tier, that it just automatically happens. And it really doesn't. And so it's the work that my team does to really activate and optimize those tiers for the client, because that's not only affecting that particular purchase, it affects any purchase that happens after this particular project.
So of all of those discovery pieces that you just described, Nikki, what, in your opinion, makes it so hard for organizations to identify those things on their own?
Quite honestly, I think you've a lot of people who have their hands in it. You have constraints from a timing perspective. They've not done the work up front, again, to be proactive. Your third-party planners don't have access to the Vizient data. And your supply chain team also does not have the resources available to really do an extensive process.
It sounds like that whole visibility piece really becomes part of the magic that the Vizient resources and solutions help pull back everything together. I'd like to hear more about the Capital Procurement Recovery Program that was part of your discovery with a client. Tell us about that.
We were working on a medical office building. It was an equipment planning engagement. We had been engaged for validation and procurement services. There had been another third party there. There was also a construction team.
An owner's rep.
Who was really pushing to have something purchased prior to being ready, prior to us have completed our validation process. And we came in and said, hold up, time out. The process hasn't been completed. We understand there are timing constraints, but just trust us. And once we really got into the quantity of the order, we were able to move the client from tier 1 to tier 4, which was fairly significant savings. We also realized we had a distributor influencer in here wanting to push the order sooner. They were really trying to rush the process.
They were really pushing a 12% price increase based on a time of the contract. And so I think Nikki's team was able to go out and pump the brakes. Let's not just assume that this is a real need. And they were able to mitigate that price increase in addition to increasing their tier activations just to provide the savings.
It was really the perfect example of the analysis of the ugly onion, right? Once you start really peeling back the layers, we started asking questions about, do you have a letter of designation? So what that letter of designation does is it allows the distributor to access the Vizient contract and provide you contract pricing. It also legally requires them to report and pay administrative fees. When we started peeling back the layers, we noticed that this particular distributor had not ever paid fees on the purchases that this organization had done. So my team was able to go back to the distributor and get $1.8 million in recovered fees paid.
That is huge.
It was, and it was very rewarding, and it was a very eye-opening experience. Because as we started to ask questions, I always tell my team, if it's happening with one client, most likely it's happening with another. And we started really looking at this particular distributor, and what kind of resulted at the end of the day, this was a very common problem. And they ended up amending their national agreement where that letter of designation was no longer required because we kept coming back to them to get fees paid. So the program is not just really about recovering what you might have overpaid and optimizing your tiers. It's really about, were there excess charges? Did you get your administrative fees paid that you were due? And those go directly back to the client.
I think you've just made a really great point that I'd like to get your opinion on. And Patrick, please chime in. How do you think that this experience and the creation of this program has fundamentally changed the conversations that you're having now?
We get asked a lot in the marketplace when we're out selling engagements. What makes us different, right? There's other equipment planning firms out there. They may have existing relationships with these clients. And so we're not the first time that these clients have worked with an equipment planning firm. So why Vizient? And our story has always really been we're the only equipment planner tied to a GPO. And what comes with that? And really, most value propositions from equipment planning firms is just on time and under budget. Ours is really still on time and under budget, but it's the value creation that we deliver to that member to make sure that they're getting the full value of every capital dollar they spend. So when we started digging into that, that's really what led to an internal process improvement led by Nikki's experience in bringing to our team, our procurement side of the house, that additional due diligence that our team does that they're not getting from other planners.
It certainly sounds like you guys are doing as much education with the client as you are doing external negotiations and looking at the agreements in detail. So I think that education piece is really so important, especially as the capital advisory services are being utilized more than ever for looking for these opportunities for increased value and navigating that journey that all of our clients are on. Let's talk a little bit about the uniqueness of what is happening here, because I think we are in a great position to help clients achieve that extra value that they may be leaving on the table. So what do you think it is about Vizient's capital equipment team in particular that makes us uniquely positioned to do this kind of work?
We already have access to the data. So we've already got access to the client data, and we have access to the supplier data as well. So what makes us different is the lift and the burden on the client is extremely minimal because we really already have access to everything that we need in order to go really do this post-procurement analysis as to whether or not everyone did their piece of the process correctly.
And in addition to the data, we have the tools. And I think almost more importantly, we have the subject matter experts that understand the tools, the data, as well as the agreement structure. And I keep going back to that because the Vizient GPO national agreements add tremendous value if you understand how to pull off each piece of it, right? And so health systems, it's not that they're not trying. It's not that they don't know what to do. I just don't think they know what to look for within the agreements. And again, having the time. The healthcare systems are pressured. Staffing's an issue. So they're working as fast as they can to maintain current existing operations. And so when these large projects come on, it's just an influx of procurement activity. And so literally they are just pushing stuff off their desk as fast as they can. So having the subject matter expertise, the time, the tools, the data really enables us to do that work for them. Like Nikki said, taking that load off of them, letting them do what they do well, which is keep their current operations running, but let us help them leverage the full value of those agreements.
In this process, I'm imagining a lot of aha moments on the client side of, oh, you found that. Oh, where did that come from? What do you think has probably been the top surprises that clients have had through this journey?
I would say the top kind of aha and client moments have really been just assuming that the supplier did what they were supposed to do, that the fees got reported and paid. Also that the tiers just magically grow as the spend grows, and it doesn't. To go back to your prior question, having lived in a healthcare system for over 20 years, your daily work doesn't stop. So when you have a large construction project, you really have to then pack that into your day. And there's not enough hours in the day to do all the steps correctly. And there's such a time pressure, these projects, and no one really cares, to be quite honest with you. The executive teams again, they want it done when they want it done. And while your supply chain people are really trying to do the best that they absolutely can do and follow their processes, they don't have enough time in their day to check all of the boxes correctly.
It sounds like what you're describing truly is the difference between a vendor and a strategic partner.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about one of the other differentiators in the program, and that's performance-based model and how that reinforces partnership and trust. Tell us how that came to be.
I would say from a fee structure, we win if the client wins. And that was important, not only to grow the business, but to also start pointing out these discrepancies. If my team does not find anything, the client doesn't pay anything. And actually, if I don't find anything, quite honestly, then the client's doing everything right. They're third-party partners, our strategic partners. Everything is being done right. If we find stuff, then we know that not only has there been some financial leakage, but also their internal procurement processes, their partners maybe need to be evaluated.
I think one of the reasons we took the approach we did was you're going to a health system that's already invested significant dollars in a capital project, right? The last thing they want to do is pay someone to come in and look at something on something they've already paid for, right? So our approach with it doesn't cost anything unless we find anything is an easy sell to them because there's no upfront cost. And what we're really doing is, again, putting that money back into their system to reinvest in that capital program and help them grow capital, help them grow additional patient care.
And I would imagine just from a professional standpoint, you don't want to raise your hand and say, hey, I think I left money on the table.
You really don't. You absolutely don't want to say, I didn't do my job correctly, or the third party I hired maybe made some mistakes. No one wants to admit that. So this program is great because we win if you win.
That's perfect. And I think that that's, again, one of the great parts of Vizient's Capital Equipment Solutions team being a strategic partner for the client and really making sure we're putting their needs up front and center. So thank you for that conversation and description. I think this sounds like a really great program, and we're excited to be talking about it. I'd like to kind of shift back into that larger picture with this program in place, and I'd like to get opinions to circle back on that big picture. What do you think healthcare executives should be thinking about before they close out a major project like this?
I somewhat think it stems back to the very first of the project, right? Maybe they should look at their partnerships that they've got when they start engaging consultants or resources to deliver these projects. Do you have the correct internal resources and enough of them? If you're partnering with a third party, do you have a partner that understands how to get you the maximum value out of your capital dollars? Fast forward, if you get to the end of your project and you did it internally, you didn't use a Vizient advisory consulting group to help you with the project, then, hey, reach out. Give us an opportunity to take a look, do the review. We'll come back to you and let you see what we were able to find. If we found something, then like Nikki mentioned, you win, we win. We'll share in the value that we delivered to you.
And it's really more about, the question is really in the reverse. So it's not about asking the question at the end of the project. It's asking, have I partnered with the right people to do the project? And are they going to do it correctly?
The best stories always end with the beginning. If there's one mindset shift that a leader can take out of what we've talked about today around capital strategy, what do you think that one lesson would be?
I would say don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions that everyone followed the process. Don't make an assumption that the supplier billed according to the GPO terms and conditions, quoted the equipment correctly. Just don't make the assumption. Make sure that you're doing all your checks and your balances. You're running things through our capital spend insight tool, doing the benchmarking.
What do you think that long-term risk is if they don't?
You're really spending more money than you need to. And like Patrick pointed out, with margins as tight as they are in healthcare today, reimbursement plummeting for routine procedures, at the end of the day, everything that we do has a patient outcome. So if you can put more money back into the system to improve your patient care, then you're doing a great job. That's really the goal, is to improve patient care. At the end of the day, everything we do has a patient and or a patient's family's outcome at the end of it.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Patrick. It's been a great conversation today. We've learned a lot, and we look forward to having you back in the studio real soon.
Thank you so much.